So the Torah portion of Kedoshim is a short parsha, but it is packed with very practical life lessons. The sages tell us that the 10 commandments are reflected in the obligations of the book, the Torah portion of Kedoshim. You know, often I've shared the thought, shared in the past, that if a human being can live by the values of the Torah portion of Kedoshim, forget about the other 53 Torah, the books of the Parsha, books of the Torah, 53 Parshas of the Torah. If a person can live by the values of the Torah portion of Kedoshim, then they are living, and that's it. They are already living on an extremely high standard. I almost feel like it's a shame that the Torah portion of Kedoshim is one parsha. You know, we only focus on it for 1 week, because then we move on to the Torah portion of Emor afterwards. What's nice is that this year, at least, it's not a double parsha, so therefore we are able to focus entirely on Kedoshim. But there's so many essential ideas. I mean, starting with the mitzvah of Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow as yourself, which the sages famously tell us is the central pillar of Judaism. So right there you have it, right? When the prospective convert came to Hillel and said, teach me the entire Torah on 1 foot, Hillel basically said that pasuk, which is right here in this week's Torah portion, and that's the center of all of Judaism, center of all of Torah. Chapter 19, verse number 18. But there's so many like that, which guide us in how to live as a proper human being, certainly as a proper Jew. It is jam-packed. So, without spending too much more time telling of the importance, let's dive into the importance and the important values of the Torah. So, I'm just going to go to one section of the parsha, and it's the section of Sheni, which begins chapter 19, verse number 15. Easy. We'll go through some of the ideas from the chapter 19, verse number 18. And we'll start there. Just a moment. Why did I say, 19 verse number 15, 19:15, and I'll pull up the screen as well. All right, so here we are, 19:15, verse number 15 in chapter 19 states as follows: Lo sa'asu avel b'mishpat. You shall commit no injustice in judgment. Lo tisa pnei dal, v'lo tehedar pnei gadol. You shall not favor a poor person, nor respect a great person. B'tzedek tishpot amitecha. You shall judge your fellow with righteousness. Right. Is that a question? You shall judge your fellow with righteousness. Let's go to Rashi. I don't know how far we'll get. Are we limited to a half hour today? Maybe we can just cancel all the afternoon appointments. So says Rashi, Lo ta'asu avel b'mishpat. You shall commit no injustice in judgment. Says Rashi, Milami shehadayan hamekalkel es hadin karui avel sanui umeshukatz cherem vitoeva. This verse teaches that a judge who corrupts the law is called unjust, hated, and disgusting, fit to be destroyed, and an abomination. For an unjust person is called an abomination. That's rather harsh. For most people would not necessarily describe such a horrible description on a flawed judge. And maybe the question one can raise then is, why would anybody want to be a judge? If a judge runs the risk of being called hated, disgusted, and fit to be destroyed, Why would anyone want to be a judge? And the answer is because we have another statement. And it's not mentioned here. Some of you who may be more familiar with the Rashis may remember the following. And that is that in the Torah portion of Yisro, we have Moshe Rabbeinu. You may be familiar with this episode. Moshe Rabbeinu is judging all the people, and then his father-in-law says, why are you doing this alone? Why don't you get a team together, pull together a team and have them help you? And Moshe says, not a bad idea. And then God concurs, and God says, that's not a bad idea. Fine. So he then arranges a system of judges. But before it gets to that, the pasuk says, Moshe was judging the people min boker ad arev, from morning till night. And Rashi says, do you think Moshe was really judging people morning to night? What about all the other obligations he had? He was also the teacher of the Jewish people. He had other obligations as leader. Is it feasible to suggest that he was teaching morning till night? So therefore Rashi answers, no. Rashi quotes from the Medrash that the reason it brings up morning and night to teach that any kol hadon din emes la'amito, anyone who judges a judgment in its truest form and gives true judgment, God says, you are now my partner in the creation in which I created morning till night. Boker and Erev is a allusion to when God created Vayi Erev Vayi Boker, the very beginning of Torah, where God says God created, it was evening, it was morning. That's said in reference to in the context of God's creation. So by using those same words in Moshe's judgment, says Rashi, the Torah is saying that one who judges properly, God says, you are my partner in creation because you're helping. I created the world and you're helping sustain the world. So basically, as corrupt or as strongly we condemn the dayan, the judge who corrupts the law, it is equally great and valuable the judge who judges honestly and judges fairly. Nobody could judge perfectly. No one's above making mistakes. That's not what we're talking about. It doesn't say the judge who makes a mistake is called disgusting. It's the judge who corrupts justice, because there's nothing worse than the corruption of justice. It's almost as if, you think about this, there's criminals out there. But when there's a criminal standing in a courtroom and the judge gives a corrupt ruling and allows the criminal to go free, the judge is worse than the criminal. Because the criminal never represented truth. They were not, all right, everyone understands there's good and evil in the world. And some people choose a path of evil. But the judge has chosen to be the representative of truth. The judge has chosen to be the representative of goodness, of truth, of fixing problems in the world. And when the goodness itself becomes a source of corruption, in a way that's worse than the criminal who's in the courtroom who he's judging. And that's why the Torah speaks so harshly about this. On the other hand, again, the judge who judges fairly, God says, you're sustaining the world. I created it. You're my partner in sustaining the world. Another thought to consider when it comes to this topic. It says, B'tzedek tishpot amitecha. You shall judge your fellow favorably. What about the fact that in the book of Jewish ethics, it says in different places, in different ways, that the words are veheve danes kol ha'adam lekaf zechus. You should judge everyone meritoriously. You see someone doing something which can be, you can question, maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right. You should judge them meritoriously. You should judge people favorably. How do we reconcile the statement in Pirkei Avos of Dan eskal adam lekaf zechus, judge everyone favorably, alongside what it says over here, which is judge everyone righteously, which means honestly? Which is it? Should I be judging people favorably or honestly? Anyone want to throw out an answer?
Yes.
All right.
That's my answer. Yes to both.
Oh, yes.
Can I suggest an answer?
Of course.
I think it's when you sign a contract or something, there's always clauses that say you're supposed to enter into a contract in good faith.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume that's what they mean when you're supposed to judge somebody favorably, or you're always supposed to enter in with an assumption of good faith.
Okay. All right. And so you're supposed to enter in good faith. That's the idea of judging someone favorably. Okay. You want to know, there's an interesting statement in the Talmud, which almost says the exact opposite. Not that I disagree with with what you just said, Bella, but there's an interesting statement of a device. I forget who it's from, maybe Rabbi Gamliel. He says, you should guard your possessions so that you should guard your possessions in such a way that you should, the wording he uses, suspect everyone. Suspect everyone to the degree that, be careful, lock the closet which has your cash stashed away. Don't trust people. However, he says, that's before something happens. However, in the aftermath of something happening, don't suspect people. So be suspicious of people to the degree that therefore you safeguard your belongings. But if someone's in your house and they leave and then you realize, I'm missing my wedding ring, you're not allowed to suspect them. Then you should assume they're righteous. So be suspicious of them before something to the degree that you protect, you act responsibly. But in the event that something did happen, don't suspect them of having done so, which is a very nuanced approach of how to see people. I think, though, the answer to the two statements, how to reconcile it, is that it depends the context. This verse is specifically talking about a judge. Most situations when we are judging people, we're actually not judges. We've turned ourselves into judges. This is a courtroom halacha. This halacha right here is specifically referring to judges in the courtroom. Someone who's in the courtroom should not view the people coming into the room as being innocent, nor should he view them as being guilty. He should say, I want to clarify absolute truth. I have no assumption right now of the people in front of me. I don't assume them to be righteous. I don't assume them to be guilty. I assume them simply, I right now have a clean slate. I will accept the information as it's given to me and then issue a ruling based perfectly on the honest evaluation of what I see. But in most situations in life, that's not what's happening. When I judge someone when I judge my neighbor's behavior, or I see someone doing something in the store, and I'm not a judge. No one's coming to me and asking for a ruling on the situation. So I can afford to judge favorably. In most situations in life, which we are not a judge in a courtroom, then the Torah says, judge favorably. You have nothing to lose by simply assuming this person is righteous, this person is holy, and even if they may seem to be doing something wrong, let me find a way to maybe try to rearrange let me try to rearrange my perspective on this to judge this person favorably. Now, obviously, even that, you have to be careful. I shouldn't judge someone favorably if it's at the expense of someone being harmed. There's many situations can come up where if I see someone hurting someone, that's not the time to judge them favorably. That's the time to protect the person who's being hurt. But in situations where it's not about protecting anybody, it's simply about how I view this person and my perspective of them, then it says, judge someone favorably. However, the very approach, which is a mitzvah for me, would be a sin for the judge in the courtroom. If the judge sits down in his seat and says, whoever comes to my courtroom, they must be innocent. They must be good people. They must be beautiful neshamas. No, that is a sinful attitude. So again, the very attitude which for the average person in many situations is a mitzvah, for the judge becomes a sin and becomes a form of corruption. So continuing in this verse, but the Torah doesn't just say, don't be corrupt in judgment. It doesn't. It could have just said, you shall not commit injustice. That would be the end of the verse. No, the Torah adds and says there are two types of injustice. One is the respecting of a great person, which is that there is, where where there's what we call common corruption, as exists in certain countries, certain places, where you have the very wealthy are able to sway the justice system to whatever they want. So that is one form of corruption, and the Torah warns against that. But there's another form of corruption, which may feel different to us. We may be more compelled to The judge who says, let me be kind to the underdog. Let me be helpful to the innocent victim. And the Torah says that too is corruption. A judge there's no place for emotions in a courtroom. In a courtroom, what matters is truth. And truth, it doesn't matter if the truth in some circumstances causes that perhaps someone, as he says over here, the poor person doesn't necessarily mean financially poor. It could be a downtrodden person. But a poor person, maybe there's a sense of compassion. Again, the courtroom is not a place, I shouldn't say this entirely. There is room for compassion in the courtroom, but in a very specific way. In the aftermath of clarifying the truth, there are situations in which compassion could play a role. But generally speaking, the dominant characteristic, or in Hebrew we say the dominant midah that should exist in the courtroom is din, which is justice, and emes, which is truth. And emes can't play favorites. It can't play favorites not to the influential, wealthy person or influential, powerful person, and it can't play favorites to the victim or to the one who is made dull, to the poor, unfortunate person. That too cannot be played favorites to. And that's why the Torah wants to not just say there should be justice, it wants to spell out both sides. There's corruption on either end. And a judge has to see, and therefore there's all sorts of laws. There's all sorts of laws which the halacha doesn't bring you here in Rashi too much. All sorts of laws in which a beis din, in which the Jewish court is not allowed to show any form of favoritism. It cannot have one side stand and the other side sit. It cannot allow, interestingly, according to Jewish law, one side cannot present its case not in the presence of the other side. The other side has to be present. There are many areas of difference between Jewish court system and the secular court system. And one of them is that they cannot present their cases not in the presence of the other side. So there's this idea of justice is the Torah speaks very strongly about it. And again, it is what is a mitzvah for most of us in situations of how we judge people becomes a sin in how the judge judges the case. And what is a mitzvah for the judge may be a sin for us. If I look at a person and say, all I'm going to look at is the facts in front of me, and I don't try to judge them favorably, then I've committed a sin. So it is depending on the context, the form of judgment of another person changes dramatically and drastically. Fine. Let's see. Right, the Gemara, Tractate Shavuos, page Lamed Amud Aleph, says that B'tzedek Tishvat Amisecha, it should be justly, the judge should not have one stand and one sit. The judge should not allow one to kind of speak at length, and the other one he should shorten, and the other one he pressures to shorten their presentation. Any way in which a judge shows any form of favoritism to one side or the other violates this commandment. Fine. There's more to talk about this, but let's see if we can cover at least one more idea today. Verse number 16. Verse number 16. Lo telech rachil be'amecha. Do not go around and be a gossip monger amidst your people. Lo sa'amod al damriecha. You shall not stand by the shedding of your fellow's blood. Ani Hashem, I am God. All right, so let me open this up again. We got some good dialogue earlier. Let's try this again. How do you understand these words? Lo telech rachil be'amecha. Do not go around as a gossip monger among your friends. Now you can read Rashi ahead of time, but if you have not yet done so, what do you understand this to mean? What is the Torah forbidding when it says Lo telech rachil be'amecha? You shall not go around as a gossip monger among your people. Anyone care to share?
Is this
And
connected
sorry,
to?
you can't get away by just saying yes this time.
I won't. Okay. Is it connected to the mitzvah or I guess the prohibition of judging someone dishonest? Or I guess it's not necessarily judging, but if you were to say someone did something like a capital punishment, for example, and they didn't do it, like it's totally wrong. I forgot what the verse is, but it says something like, don't bear false witness. That's what I'm thinking of. Is this connected to bearing false witness?
Is this connected to bearing false witness? It is not. It is a separate prohibition. That is a very important prohibition, but this is separate from that. Moshe, you have what to share? See, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's more like what in the Latin culture. In the Latin culture, they call it bochinche, right? That's a new word for you, bochinche.
Yes.
And basically, what it is going from groups of friends to groups of friends, talking bad about somebody and putting them down. And sometimes they do it innocently, just for you to know this and this and that. So they try to do it innocently, but yet they're slandering somebody else. So they take those opportunities to do that.
What's the word again? Bochinche?
Bochinche, yes.
Bochinche. I'm going to try to stay away from bochinche. All right, very good. Very good. Thank you. Vilma, you had what to add over here?
So I have a lot of thoughts about this because I know there's a lot of halakhic laws related to speech. Speech is very powerful. It's latent energy that we bring out. So what is it that we're really bringing out in people? You know, are we talking about the negative or are we focusing upon the positive? So whatever it is we talk about in regards to ourselves or other people is what we bring out of them and make it a reality.
Okay. So the speech we do brings out a certain reality. Okay. So both points which were made, both the bochinche and what Vilma brought up about bringing out are both true and both very much related to this verse. But let's speak practically about what the Torah is speaking, which violation is the Torah referring to over here. And as it turns out, as Rashi spells out, there are 3 different forms of forbidden speech. And they're all included in Lo Telech Rachil. The first is, and we'll go from what is the most obviously problematic to what's least obviously problematic. Most obviously problematic is what we call motzi shem ra, which means slandering someone. So walking around and speaking negatively about someone else, something which is not true. To say so-and-so stole from this store, and that person in fact never stole, that is Shonhara, that is motzi shem ra, that is slander, and that is forbidden as part of this verse. The second prohibition is what's perhaps the most famous of all the 3, and that is Shonhara. And that is going back to that example where I go over to someone and I say, so-and-so stole from this store. Now, that it happens to be true. That's not slander because it's true. That's Shonhara. That is speaking negatively about someone. That's what we would often call gossip. That's second. So the first is motzi shem ra, falsely speaking negatively about others. The second is Shonhara, speaking negatively, though true, about someone else. And the third, which is least obvious, and I should say the third, which most people struggle with, is what's called Refilos. And that is simply going around and sharing other people's private information, whether true or not, whether problematic or not. Do you know that so-and-so spent this and this amount on their vacation? Did you know that? Did you know that they went there? And, it's just gossip. It's just talk about other people. Sharing private information about other people is a Torah prohibition of lo selech rachil. The word rachil is yeah. I see some questions. Yes, go ahead. Vilma, Bella, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say also in like a court context, that sort of gossiping, especially in a tight-knit community, can kind of undermine the rulings of the court. Because even if someone's exonerated, if you've already tarnished their reputation, they're kind of like out of luck regardless.
Right, but again, you're still focusing on a negative circumstance. But in the what if it's not negative? What if there's no incriminating factor here other than it's their private information? This is the private, just it's someone else's life. You know, I saw that they went to this place on vacation, and you know, isn't that interesting that they went there? Or you know, or so and so I heard is dating so and so. I mean, these conversations are not negative, but they're private information of someone else. This is called Refilos. The Hebrew word for Rachil is the root of the word Rachil is a peddler. A peddler, today you don't see that as much in today's reality, because today we have Amazon, but it used to be that a peddler would go from one city to the other peddling their wares. So a person would come with their wagon and they're selling, I don't know, clocks or watches, and they'll sell watches and they'll buy something else from that city, and then they'll go to the next city and sell the last item they bought, constantly buying and selling items. So there's information peddlers. Whether we call it that so or not, there are situations where I meet with someone, and a big part of the dialogue or the nature of this meeting is that I will share some information with you, very often the private information about other people. You'll share with me, and then we'll each unload and reload our stock of information, and we'll move on. This is peddling information. Now, the Torah just says it's forbidden. Rambam expands upon it and says because it tears at the fabric of community. When people are just talking about each other. And basically what happens is, he says these three levels, although we've listed it as three different levels, one leads to the other. With the eventually, you start, if a society or a friendship or a community in which gossip, even if it's just regular gossip, not negative, is the norm and is accepted, it's inevitable that it'll lead to Shonhara, to speaking negatively about others. Because there's a human tendency. When we speak about others, if I bring to your attention, do you know so-and-so is dating so-and-so? So often the response will be, oh, well, do they know that so-and-so has a history of alcohol abuse? Hey, it's inevitable that you speaking about people leads to negative speech, and negative speech leads to slander, which tears at the fabric of a community. And so therefore this prohibition, it's not easy. This mitzvah is not easy. Once most people think, I'll stay away from speaking negatively about others. That's true, but can we really stay away from speaking about others altogether? We're not talking, I don't mean we're not allowed to talk about people, Elon Musk bought Twitter. That's not a problem. That's not Shonhara. That's worldwide news. It's okay. News information, which the whole world is talking about people, that's not private. The common denominator between all these three is that we're talking about someone else's private life. Something which is public knowledge, okay, that's public knowledge. I mean, there's a line out there, I don't know, I've heard it in different variations, that the lowest level of speech is about things. The lowest level of speech is about people. Above that, it's talking about things. And the highest form of speech is talking about ideas. And so therefore, the more we can lift our conversations to be about ideas and productive conversation, the better. And this is a mitzvah which is a challenging mitzvah, but one that we can, in each of our lives, we can probably take a step forward, at least, in the careful nature we have about this mitzvah. All right, I'm going to stop here. There's a lot more to get to on this topic, but we're going to call it a day for now. And as I said, the Torah portion Kedoshim is just filled. It's filled. In Hebrew, we say male v'gadosh, which means full and overflowing with ideas that we can focus on, think about, and speak about. So may we all have the opportunity to study that properly this week, or to the best of our ability, and really reach the name of the Torah portion, which is Kedoshim, to reach a state of holiness, which will happen through the observance of the mitzvahs in the parsha. Thank you all for joining. I could take a couple questions if there are.
Thank you.
Stop the screen share, pause the recording.